All right, let's talk Florida State Seminoles football here for a little bit. Now that we are getting closer and closer to the regular season, we're starting to see a lot of big news flash in terms of what guys are ready to step up, what playmakers are ready to emerge as we get closer to football finally returning. But lost in the hustle and bustle of that, look, that's really important. We've talked about that a lot. The long term lifeblood of every single program, and Florida State, no exception, has been on display over the past few days. We're talking massive recruiting landscape altering moves made across the board, and Florida State has done an incredible job. We'll get to that latest in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew. And this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, without further ado, let's bring you the latest at the time of this recording anyway. More good news could have dropped, but this is the latest Florida State news recruiting wins. Let's pull these up for you guys. This is all courtesy of the great Hayes Fawcett at On3 Sports. Give him a follow on extra Twitter or just check out what he writes. Really great guy when it comes to recruiting news and information. We love him on this channel. He posted breaking, this is over the past 24 hours or so, breaking 4-star quarterback Jaden O'Neal has committed to Florida State. He tells me for at On3 Recruits. The 6'3", 215-pound quarterback from Long Beach, California, decommitted from Oklahoma. Obviously, is now committed to Florida State. Next report, 4-star wide receiver Devin Carter has flipped from Auburn to Florida State. The 6'1", 175-pound wide receiver had been committed to the Tigers since January. It's a name a lot of you FSU fans might remember because his dad, Dexter, played running back for Florida State and was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, obviously a number of years ago. And then finally here, 4-star running back Xavier Tiller has committed to Florida State. The 6'5", 225-pound tight end from Fairburn, Georgia, chose the Seminoles over Alabama and Auburn. Wow, so getting a big-time SEC win when it comes to Xavier Tiller. Obviously, 3 great moves here across the board for Florida State. But one of the things that I noticed, these are 3 big wins, and Florida State has had they had the best day out of any day, out of any program in terms of recruiting wins, both the number and quality of them over the past 24 to 36 hours. What really jumped out at me was the other programs that had good days. It was Alabama. This was a team that was in playoff contention last year. This was Miami had a good day. There was a team in playoff contention last year. Notre Dame had some good stuff, right? They were a team that went all the way to the national championship game. But if you look at those programs and then comparing to Florida State, there is no reason based on wins, losses, so-called trajectory of the program that Florida State should be dominating the way they did over the past day or so with these recruiting wins. We're talking about flips. We're talking about getting national kids. A kid from Long Beach, California, for example. A kid where Alabama and Auburn is knocking on the door. There is no reason to think, based on what Florida State put on the field last season, that they should have pulled off this kind of move. And I think this is the genius, and the credit needs to be given to head coach Mike Norvell and his entire recruiting staff and the recruiting department in Tallahassee. One of the things that great recruiters and great salesmen can do this too is that even when you don't have your best stuff, which Florida State did not have at all last year, they're able to make you think that you do, right? There's a great pitchers in baseball have this effect, right? When they're having an off day, they just don't have their fastball, their curveball, or whatever. They can find a way to intimidate batters to say, oh my goodness, he's on today, even though he's off, right? It's just sort of an innate skill pitchers have. Salesmen have it. Recruiters have it. Mike Norvell has it. Florida State was ugly last year. And you can throw a lot of 4-letter words in to surround that whatever you want. It was bad last year for Florida State. But despite that, they're winning in the recruiting department. And these are recruits, by the way, if you look at the 24/7 rankings, these are 3 recruits that all elevated Florida State's overall average. So this wasn't like, bottom barrel guys. These are 4-star high quality. All 3 of these guys rated in the low 90s for 24/7 sports. So these are quality players, quality prospects. And despite all the issues last year, despite the disaster of the 2024 season, questions about Mike Norvell's leadership, suddenly they're winning in the recruiting game and doing an incredible job. This is what leadership can do. This is what finding and retaining the right head coach can do. You're going to have aberrations. You're going to have travesties. Unfortunately, you hope it's not as bad as it was last year. But look, this is football. This is life. Things happen. How do you recover? How do you bounce back? If you have strong leadership and talented leadership, you will bounce back. And look, we haven't seen the results on Saturdays yet. I think they'll bounce back in a big way when it comes to the results on the field this upcoming fall. But I think it's very clear that this Florida State Seminoles program, if you look at these recruiting wins, is still healthy, and they will return to being a contender in very short order. All right, Miles, I know you've got a few thoughts on this. But first, Florida State fans, in the comment section below, we're talking about a bunch of different positions here. We got a quarterback, we got a wide receiver, we got a tight end. But I'm going to flip the script on you guys here a little bit because we're talking skill position. I'm a former offensive lineman. long time ago now. Who is, your opinion, the greatest offensive lineman in Florida State history? There's a lot of interesting names here. I mean, this could go like a bunch of different directions, but I'm going to make you pick one. Who is the greatest offensive lineman in Seminoles history? Let us know in the comment section below. Really want to hear from you guys. I think there's a lot of different ways this could go. But Mize, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest news out of Tallahassee?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is great news for the Knowles. Like you said, I think Norvell has this team moving in the right direction, especially on the recruiting front. And, over the last 36, 48 hours, all of these moves start to pop up. But I think we're far, far from the end of it, especially with the latest news coming out of the state of Florida, passing the laws about the money being able to use for the teams. And, Monday, FSU's Board of Trustees vote in. They're allowed now $22.5 million over the next 3 years to use on recruiting. This was before that. So I think all of this money coming into the program, we're about to see a lot more recruiting wins for this team. And this was before they had the dollars to dole out. This is before they got a huge infusion of cash from all their auxiliary funds they're able to use now. I think this is going to be the start of something big for the Seminoles. Because quite frankly, when you talk about the Seminoles now, last year you said it, they're horrible. They're really just not a lot to talk about good for the Seminoles. But it's hard to say this, and it's really, people might not believe it, but I really think that the Mike Norvell did a great job this offseason to start to get the swagger back to Florida State. And I think one of the big moves he did was bring in, kind of dicey but really talented quarterback Thomas Castellanos. We already all saw the comments that he said, talk about bring on Alabama week 1. We're not afraid. Nick Saban's not there to bail them out anymore. It's a different program than they were. Tough words. We're going to see what happens week 1, but I can feel the swagger back at Florida State. You kind of feel the grittiness. We're seeing, recruiting wins. People want to be, it's a different environment there from last year already. 2 years ago, Florida State, great environment, really took a big hit last year, but now this offseason, we're starting to see a lot of that grittiness, a lot of that swagger come back to the Knowles, and I really love what we're seeing. I love these recruiting wins, and like I said, with all the money coming in, all of the resources for Florida State being at the forefront, I think this is just the beginning. I think we're going to see some big wins for this program going forward, and I think this team is going to take a step up this year, but in years to come as well, we're going to start to see some massive jumps for the Knowles, and we're going to see this team come back to the days of going undefeated and should have been national championship contenders. This is a team that has a lot to prove. I think they can do it, and I think already we're starting to see the culture shift. We're seeing all good signs for Florida State. The last 36, 48 hours have been absolutely fantastic, but I don't expect it to slow down. Keep your eyes peeled. I think things are just going to get better for the Knowles going down the stretch.
You bring up an interesting point about swagger, and it's hard for me. I go back and forth on this kind of thing. How much does it really matter? But if you look at Florida State historically, there's some evidence to point that it does. So if you look at, of course, in the mid 1980s, obviously with Bowden there, Coach Bowden doing a good job. He had made that program, made them relevant, made them pretty good. But they weren't in that era where they finished like top 5, like 15 years in a row in the final polls. Deion Sanders arrives in 1985, and by 1987, they're the number 2 team in the country, and then they just go on this run where they're finished. This is their rankings: 2, 3, 2, 4, 4, 2, 1, 5, 5, 3, 3, 3, 1, 4. I'm 4. I mean, they just absolutely go on this absolute 15-year tear where they dominate college football the way no one else has. As great as Nick Saban was in Alabama, they didn't have this run of 5-win seasons under that Bobby Bowden era Florida State squad. And if you look at it, it coincides with the emergence and the arrival of Deion Sanders and that swagger, that attitude. And the rise of Florida State kind of paralleled the fall of the Miami Hurricanes in the late 80s, early 90s. They were the original team that had that swagger. Of course, we've seen the documentaries and all that stuff. Florida State usurped them, took it over. They dominated the 90s after Miami did a really good job in the 1980s. I think we look at Florida State right now, having a little swagger and energy back is kind of what they need, right? I think it's something to get the juice flowing, would get people wanting to go to Florida State again, because there was a period, if we back up, 15 months, something like 16, 18 months, however long it was, before the injury to Jordan Travis, they were arguably the best team in college football. It wasn't even 2 years ago. And now we're saying, oh my goodness, what's going on in Florida State? They can still return to that in very fast order. I think getting some swagger back paired with their talent overall could be exactly the remedy to get this team back to contending. But I'm going to go back to what I originally said. Mike Norvell deserves a lot of credit being a steady hand at the ship, making sure he handles all the ups and downs of the program. There's a lot of people that, like a lot of coaches even, right, where you have a season like Florida State had in 2024 and it just destroys you, right? So far, at least as we get ready for the regular season, still a couple weeks away, a couple months away, Norvell has done a really good job steadying the ship, making a lot of really good moves, focusing, as all good coaches have to do, on the short term and the long term simultaneously. I think it's a great sign for the health of this Florida State program. And as we get closer to the regular season, this is a team to watch, because if they're getting good recruits now, if they start winning again, we're going to see them immediately leapfrog to the top of the recruiting ranks, because they're not that far away right now, actually, the way it currently sits. If you look at Florida State for the 2026 class, the programs that are right ahead of them, there's Texas, college football playoff team. Penn State, college football playoff team. Miami just missed out. Clemson, college football playoff team. Ohio State won the national title. Georgia, playoff team. Notre Dame went to the national championship game, right? They are not like, they are the next tier the way it currently sits in the recruiting rankings. If Florida State starts winning, paired with some swagger back, they could leapfrog those guys and go right into the top of the mix in terms of recruiting talent. And then they're going to be back to winning national titles once again. They got to start winning on Saturdays. We all understand and realize that, but at least at this point, we can look at the results off the field and say this Seminoles program is trending in the right direction.